Hello and welcome to the Property Investors Handbook podcast. I'm your host, Adam Bell, taking over from Rob Verhove, who has moved on. Really excited to be in the chair. And of course, we've got our property management expert with us here once again, Colleen Sutherland. Welcome.
Thank you, Adam.
Excellent. So today, a hot topic when it comes to property management, and something that all property investors would have had to think about and decide upon whenever they have invested, and that is choosing the right tenant. So, first of all, explain to me, how do you go about choosing the right tenant? What does the right tenant look like?
The right tenant needs to prove who they are, that they can afford the property and that they can look after the property. So they're the three criteria. And while it sounds simple, it's not necessarily that easy.
Okay. So how would you go, as a property manager, how would you go about, working out whether a prospective tenant has those three things?
Well, they make application for the property, but before they make application, they will have viewed the property. And a lot of times when we are showing properties, we talk to the tenants and just sort of get a feel for will they be a right fit for the property, because that's really important. And then when the application does come in, then the due diligence process starts.
Okay. And what is the due diligence process?
So they complete the application, so they have put in their ID and their work reference or work employment, which will include an income. And then they'll put in any references that they may have, so previous rental references, or if they've just sold a property, their agent who sold the property, we get a reference off them.
Sure. And are they written references, or do you actually speak to referees?
Both.
Both?
Yeah, both. So what happens when they make application, we have to keep in mind that that application will form part of any insurance claim that we may make. So we have to dot our I's and cross our T's, and that you've got it in writing that they've been able to look after the place, all their inspections were great, when they moved out it was fantastic, all that sort of thing, and that forms part of the due diligence.
Fantastic. And I guess you'd probably occasionally get some bad references where you do, well, put it this way, where you do call and you get not so great information on the people who are applying.
Yeah, unfortunately you do. And we have to be very diplomatic if we are refusing an applicant. And those ones you sort of put to a side and move on with the other ones that you're working through. So when you've got a bad reference, you sort of halt that application and move and you do move on to the next one.
Sure. Okay. So again, explain maybe in a bit more detail those three major areas in which a successful applicant must produce evidence, and why those areas are so important.
So when they're proving who they are, they need to give us some forms of ID, which is obviously either a passport, birth certificate, driver's license. And that, in this day and age, there is a lot of fraud. So they need to prove that we're putting in Joe Smith, and
Joe Smith is Joe Smith.
Is Joe Smith and his wife and three kids. And while the kids don't have to produce their ID, each applicant must have ID. And the other thing is that if there is any claim made against them, that we're claiming on the right person. So proving who they are is vital. And that's the same with anything these days. You've got to jump through so many hoops. But legislation is dictating to us there. When they can afford the property, so we can't, as a rule of thumb, we can't take more than 1/3 of their combined income.
Right.
So what's happening on today's market, which is it's not normal, but the mum and dad have got good jobs, high income. However, they're not meeting that criteria of more than 1/3 of their combined income. And so that's where we make sure that they can afford the property.
Sure.
And then for looking after the property, it's references from a previous agent or landlord, and like I said, if they're selling their property, then a reference from them as well. If they're moving out of home, that's a little bit more tricky. So that is a different set of due diligence that we do, because we need to prove that they did live at home and that they haven't lived somewhere else and they're saying they've come from mum and dad's and stuff like that. So,
well, it sounds like a minefield, and this is why I gather you need a property manager to be able to look after this for you. It's so much to consider. And why you'd want to get someone like Sutherland's on board to help you with this. I could only imagine what it would be like to try and do this yourself as an investor, owning a property. And look, I gather they do. But, where could somebody, doing this themselves sort of fall over or find that they trip themselves up?
A lot of it is where the tenant may have been before. So we've got some programs that we can look the applicants up, where we know that they don't owe XYZ Realty money, and then they said, "Oh, I've just lived at home for a little while. I haven't rented anywhere." So we can find where they've been, often where they've been, and allow that. And we've got another one where we can make sure that their credit reference, and we can't go right into their credit referencing, but we can find out whether they owe big dollars on a fine or something like that. So that's, again, taken into consideration when we are looking at affordability.
Sure. So obviously a great idea to engage a property manager to do this for you.
Yeah, because the property manager or the agency will have these programs in place that aren't readily available just to a private landlord.
Sure. And so you engage, a property manager like Sutherland's to do this for you. How can an owner be involved in the process if they want to be? I guess you would have a lot of owners who still want to, and you obviously give them the final selection. Mm-hmm. How do owners get involved in the process alongside of you?
Well, if there's more than one application, we'll present them all to the owner for their final decision. 9 times out of 10, they'll go, "Oh, I don't know, just leave it up to you," and then we're able to make that decision for them. It is hard when you've got 4 or 5 really good applicants. Then we have to really narrow it down as to who came in first and who can move in first and that sort of thing. When the competition is high, people are actually offering more money,
right, which
I don't necessarily encourage, because the rent is high enough as it is. And then if they're offering more money, then that might put them out of the running of affordability.
Sure. So you've got to reassess. So
it can be very tricky choosing the right tenant.
Sure. And I guess there's another thing that a property manager, takes on as part of this process is, managing the emotions of the people who, miss out. Because we know what the market's like at the moment. You'd have to be living under a rock not to know about the rental crisis, as they're calling it. So that must be a difficult job.
It is difficult because there's just so many lovely people out there, and if I had 10 houses, I would be able to rent them 10 times over. But at the moment, I've got that one house, and there's going to be one very happy person, and however many unhappy people. We did an inspection yesterday, and the rent is very reasonable on today's market. We have 28 applications.
Wow.
And I don't envy our leasing consultant working through those ones.
No. I mean, if you put in the sort of the analogy of a business owner and getting applicants for a job interview, this makes, the fees that property managers charge worth their weight in gold just for this process alone. Yes. I mean, having to sift through 28 applications, I'm sure you've even had more in this current market at times. I mean, it's what business owners go to recruitment consultants for, isn't it? So that they don't have to do it, and they find the best people. So how do you go about, I guess, mitigating the risk of getting a potentially bad tenant that slips through the cracks? Yeah.
Well, the one that slips through the cracks is often the dishonest reference that we've received. Yeah. So they may still be able to afford it, prove that they can afford it and that they are who they are, but a reference may be that someone is trying to get rid of their tenant and gives them a glowing reference, and we take it on. It is very
scenario.
Hard. Yeah, and then from the outset, you'd like, uh-oh. So, yes, I had one of them a little while ago, and looking at the references because, again, in writing.
Yep.
And I'm there, how did this one get through? And then when I rang the agent back some 4 months later, they went, yeah, we just had to get rid of him. It's like, my God.
Nothing you can do about that.
No. And he was a professional. They were both professionals and had a little baby and a daughter. And
so no red flags at all?
No, none.
No.
None. So, yeah, and you can tell in the first couple of weeks that you think, oh, there's something sus going on here, and we have to keep on top of that.
That's my next question. What can you do? Look, you've given them a tenancy. They're signed up for 6 months, 12 months, and 2 or 3, like you said, you start to get little signs 2 or 3 weeks in that, I'm not too sure about these people. What can you do there?
The only thing you can do is monitor them. So they were good at paying the rent, but they had maintenance after maintenance after maintenance. And then the landlord at the time, yep, no problem. But then the tenant wouldn't let them in. And so then we were getting bills for that maintenance guy to go there because he'd tried already 5 times and made an appointment, couldn't get in. And it's like, okay. And so I'd ring him and say, we've made this appointment, we're fixing this thing. Oh, it doesn't suit me. And it didn't suit him for 6 months. I couldn't do things. So in the end, we did terminate the tenancy and used a various set of procedures on how to do that.
I mean, everything you're telling me about here, Colleen, just keeps screaming at me. This is why people need to use a good property manager.
Yeah.
There are so many things that you can come up against, and I'm thinking this in terms of, what if this was my property and I had to deal with all this while I'm living my life?
Yes.
That's so to have someone in your corner looking after all of this is exactly probably why we're doing this series, and letting people know just about the value of what a good property manager does.
So if I was a private landlord and I wasn't in property management, but I know what I know, I wouldn't manage it myself because, 1, I wouldn't have the time, but 2, a property manager takes out the emotion between the two. So the landlord, it's either his home or his money invested in there, and the tenant, it's his home, but, I've got to be right type thing.
Sure.
And they do get at loggerheads. So you've got a go-between person to take the emotion out of it to handle whatever situation comes up.
Get it sorted, whatever it needs to be.
Yeah, especially if we've been unfortunate to pick up a not-so-great tenant. And, you really need someone, and they've got to monitor it. They've got to have the systems in place. I wouldn't want to do it myself.
No, certainly not. So, look, you mentioned about, tenants maybe flying in under the radar and potentially ones who aren't, great, but who don't have red flags. What would be some red flags that you see in in the application process where, on the surface it might look okay, but you kind of look and think,
Yeah, sometimes it's gut feeling, to be honest, when we're out doing the inspection or the open house. It's sort of like, so say they rock up and they park themselves in the driveway and sitting there waiting for us to turn up, and then there's that aggressive type behaviour. So straight up, it's like.
So you're assessing them from the moment, the moment you lay eyes on them, because there's another good point that we haven't even touched on here, that you do the open home for the owner. And,
yes, and it's how they conduct themselves during the open home, and that's a whole another subject. But we do monitor. We're not being all spy and creepy, but you are aware, you're watching, you're listening to the questions that they do and don't ask, and that sort of thing. So the application process starts from there.
I think we've got a whole other episode there just on open homes, and I'm sure you've got some stories to tell too of things you've seen go on there. So.
So there's that one, and then there's during the application process, it's like whether it's financial and you're thinking, well, this is not adding up. Whether it is the money, or your timeline is not right.
Yep.
You've sort of missed things on your timeline.
So you do become a little bit of a detective with all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to. You've really got to, because you will only trip yourself up if you pick up a not so great tenant. The other thing at the open house is that, is this tenant the right fit for this property? So we can have someone come along, mum, dad and 4 kids, trying to fit into a 3-bedroom house, and they're just not going to fit.
No.
Yeah.
Yep,
So
sure. Now, I've heard, is there a register of, no, it's not the register of bad tenants, but is there a register of tenants who've done the wrong thing previously and are they banned from, how does that work?
No, not necessarily banned, because, again, we have to look into whether there was a personality clash, and legislation has stopped all this now, but there were not so much landlords because they don't have access to it, but the property managers were lodging tenants because they didn't get along. So then they would lodge them, and then someone else would come along and go, no, you're there, you're out. Whereas even though they're there, you do have to look in a bit deeper as to why they're there, contact that agent, determine whether it was a personality clash.
Sure.
But legislation has changed that now. So.
Sure. Okay. Now, you've been doing this 30 years. Tell me about a time where you've picked up on something in an application process and you've been able to, I guess, pick up and stop a bad tenant getting through.
So I had one that was applying for a rural or a semi-rural property, and I had to question him about his income, and then when I started questioning, he goes, the other agent never asked me this. And I said, oh, that's okay, we all do something different, but the income, it's sort of not quite adding up with what you've got here as to what I can see over here. And where do you feel that extra income is going to come from? Well, that's none of your business.
Ooh. Ooh.
So, yeah, when someone it is my business, you're making an application, you're about to sign a contract.
I need to see if you can pay your rent.
I need to see, and he goes, I can pay it. I've got money. And I said, I get that, but I need to see it on formally on, whether it's bank statements or income statements, something like that. And we went back and forwards for like 3 days with him getting very angry because I said, I can't take it any further until you can prove it. And then in the end, he gave me a piece of paper, which I already had. He didn't know I had. And I went, yeah, no, I'm sorry, your application's been denied. And he hit the roof. Oh, no. So he hit the roof because more so because he's been found out.
Yep. Yeah.
And he goes, oh, well, it doesn't matter now because XYZ Realty I've got another property. And I went, good.
Good. Enjoy that one.
Yeah.
You handled that very well, Colleen. Yeah, I can see you're very diplomatic, because at that first bit where he said, I've got the money, I would have just said, tell your story walking, pal.
Yeah.
So
underneath? No.
No, I get it. No, and look, that's something, why, people should consider putting their properties with Sutherland's, because just that example there, the empathy and the way you handle it, that's fantastic. And that's only something you can get and learn over many, many years of having dealt with probably thousands of applications.
So I've come from give me a license and $20 and here's the keys, go have a look, to, they're all guided inspections and all sorts of things. So, the 30 plus years that I've had, I've seen go from $20 in your driver's license right through to now. So.
Sure. And look, final question, because we're just about out of time, but how does selecting the right tenant contribute to the long-term success of an investment property?
That's a really good question, because one of the things one of our mottos is that you begin with the end in mind. So choosing the right tenant will set you up for success. So whether it sets you up for a long-term relationship or just that 12 months that they need to be in there, or it will make your job so much easier or that much more difficult. And we're all looking for an easy working relationship. And, that's why choosing the right tenant is going to be vital. They'll look after the property better. They'll be more respectful and that sort of thing. So,
Makes sense.
vital.
Makes sense. And look, I think that the key thing there is too that you want to pick the right tenant because it makes your job so much easier.
Correct.
And that the whole three-way relationship just, sings. So
Yeah, it flows a lot better.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, look, that is all the time we have today. But look, you've won me over. I think I'd be
When you
having
sign.
exactly. But I might put my application in. You might reject it. So, look, where can people get in touch with you, Colleen?
Sutherland's Property Management is, you can Google us and go to our website, and the website is spmg.com.au.
Fantastic. Look, absolutely vital information there today for anyone who has an investment property on choosing the right tenant. Thank you, and I look forward to our next episode.
Thanks, Adam.